Obamacare was ultimately a failed policy fix for healthcare, and how can Democrats be trusted to fix healthcare when Obamacare was ultimately the solution?
The overwhelming majority of the American people, including Republicans, support the Affordable Care Act because it's a vital part of providing health insurance coverage to working class Americans, middle class Americans, and everyday Americans. Republicans are peddling a lie that the current structure of the Affordable Care Act relates to the COVID-19 pandemic. It has nothing to do with the COVID-19 pandemic. The Affordable Care Act tax credits were put into place as part of the Inflation Reduction Act. That's what we're talking about. Lowering the costs for hard-working American taxpayers at a moment when the Republican healthcare crisis is skyrocketing the cost of living related to premiums, copays, and deductibles. And by the way, we have a cost of living crisis in the United States of America that Republican policies are making worse. Donald Trump and the Republicans spent all last year promising to lower costs on day one. Costs aren't going down, and the American people know it. Costs are going up. Inflation is going up. The Trump tariffs are adding thousands of dollars a year in additional expenses at a moment when everyday Americans are already struggling to make ends meet. And now Republicans have shut down the government rather than extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits to try to make health insurance more affordable, which is why Democrats are in this fight on behalf of the American people. Second row.
Leader Jeffries, what do you make of Speaker Johnson canceling House sessions this week, and when do you think he'll call for the House to return?
House Democrats were here last week. House Democrats are here this week. House Democrats will be here next week. House Republicans are on vacation right now. That's extraordinary. They canceled votes last week. House Republicans have canceled votes this week. We haven't been in session since September 19th. And on that day, Republicans got out of town before sundown, never to be seen again. As we approach the government shutdown and are now in day 8 of the Trump Republican shutdown. And these extremists don't even want to show up to work when they're requiring hardworking federal employees to show up to work without pay because of the Republican shutdown. And so we've repeatedly made clear we will sit down as Democrats anytime, any place, anywhere with anyone, our Republican colleagues, either here in the Congress or go back to the Oval Office to reopen the government, to enter into a spending agreement that actually makes life better for the American people and that addresses the Republican health care crisis. I don't know if anyone else wanted to add. Yeah.
You know, Republicans love to advocate for more work requirements for poor people, people on SNAP, people on Medicaid. Well, I got an idea. Let's have a work requirement for Republicans to show up to Congress and do your goddamn job. I mean, millions of people are about to lose their health care. This is a serious crisis we're in, and we can avoid it. We can avoid people losing their health care, and we can keep the government open. They need to show up.
Okay. Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Yesterday you said that 1-year extension on the ACA subsidies was a non-starter. Hakeem said that, told me that red line was not helpful to the conversations that she's having in the Senate with her colleagues on both sides of the aisle. Leader Schumer said this morning that he didn't want to negotiate in public and declined to go as far as you did yesterday. Are you still consistent with red line being no to a 1-year extension, or kind of where are you at today on that?
Yes, if anything is presented to us, of course, the caucus will consider it in good faith. But at the moment, here's where we stand. Republicans enacted massive tax breaks for their billionaire donors as part of the One Big Ugly Bill. And they made those tax breaks permanent, while at the same time ripping Medicaid away from 14 million Americans and stealing food from the mouths of hungry children, seniors, and veterans. And then, are we to take the position at this moment in time, in the midst of a Republican healthcare crisis, that we can't provide stability and certainty to working class Americans who rely on the Affordable Care Act tax credits? That's an unreasonable position for anyone in Congress to take at this moment in time, relative to what Republicans have done in ripping health care away from tens of millions of Americans. Our position that has been articulated in a bill that was introduced by Senator Patty Murray and Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro is a permanent extension of the Affordable Care Act tax credits to match the permanent extension that Republicans on their own saw fit to do for the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected as part of the Republican continuing effort to subsidize the lifestyles of the rich and shameless. Now, at the end of the day, the caucus, in good faith, will evaluate anything presented from the Senate. But, in our view, as it relates to the Affordable Care Act tax credits and any other effort to address the Republican health care crisis, it has to be meaningful. It has to be meaningful in terms of making a difference in the lives of the American people.
Do you maintain that there's no daylight between you and Senate Democrats?
Yes. Okay. Back.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. There's been a lot of discussion about whether there should be vote on paying the military during this shutdown. I know some of your members sent a letter to the Speaker asking him to call the House back on it. Today, the Speaker said unlikely because basically the House had the opportunity to have that vote. Do you believe there should be a standalone vote on military pay?
I believe that we should pay our men and women in uniform, and I support the effort of our members to make sure that that takes place. And shame on the Republicans for remaining on vacation and even refusing to pay our troops because of their continued effort to gut the health care of the American people, which they're putting above even the men and women of the U.S. military. I don't know if Katherine, Ted, you want to address this? Go ahead, Ted.
Having served on active duty in the U.S. military, it is insane not to pay our troops. Some of them are in high-risk missions, and you want them thinking about whether they can get paid, whether they can care for their family. You don't want them focused on that. You want them focused on our national security, and this is going to affect our national security. House Democrats are here. Republicans are on vacation. They need to come back and work, and we need to pay our troops.
I would just add that Mike Johnson sort of doubled down on this and showed their callous disregard for the Americans involved in their shutdown. Because what he said was a vote to give funding to our troops so they don't miss a paycheck while serving our country would be a show vote. A show vote? I can't imagine anything more disrespectful. And it's just insight into how they are viewing this. You take the deal we are offering to the American people, and the Republican deal is we take your health care away in order to pay for permanent tax breaks for the very wealthiest people. And if you don't take that deal, we're going to shut down government. And we're not even going to come to work while we are telling hardworking Americans who serve the public, you've got to go to work and not get paid. But us, we'll get paid and not show up for work. That's how little regard they have for the American people and what they're going through. And this entire system and this entire shutdown is based on their allegiance to the very wealthy. And American families are not making it. And every day they make life harder and more expensive. And you can see it in the way they toss aside payment to the troops as a political stunt, some sort of show vote. This is something that we have come together in a bipartisan way at the beginning of every shutdown and voted to do. That is what we do when we are in these terrible situations of a government shutdown. And the fact that they don't do it tells you exactly how they regard our troops and the American people.
Okay.
Will you call Speaker Johnson and implore him to swear in Aguilar Grijalva?
We have made clear privately and publicly that Representative Aguilar Grijalva should be sworn in immediately, without delay. Mike Johnson swore in 2 Republican members of Congress immediately after their April 1st special elections were concluded during a pro forma session when no one else was even around. And that was done by Republicans because they wanted to jam their one big ugly bill down the throats of the American people so they could rip away health care, steal food from children, and enact massive tax breaks for their billionaire donors. Republicans acted with great urgency to swear in 2 right-wing members of Congress to do in the American people in order to reward the wealthy, the well-off, and well-connected. But now, at this moment, Representative-elect Aguilar Grijalva, who won by much wider margins than those 2 Republican members, there is no dispute or controversy relative to her election. And so many of us are asking the question, why the delay, Mike? What's the delay with respect to Representative-elect Aguilar Grijalva? Does it have anything to do with Republicans' continuing effort to hide the Epstein files from the American people? Inquiring minds want to know. Thanks. 3rd row. You?
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
I got that right? 3rd row. All right.
It's actually for Whip Clark,
Okay.
Chief Justice, and
Yeah.
Leader Jeffries, feel free to as well. Just curious what steps you're taking right now to make sure that back pay for federal furloughed workers is guaranteed under the 2019 law.
We have already taken the steps necessary because, as you pointed out, that is the law that Speaker Johnson voted for. So we know what the law says, and we know that we cannot continue to stand by when the President of the United States says, you know what we're going to do? We're going to continue to make an already painful shutdown even more painful, sort of on the theory that, until morale improves, the beatings will continue on the American people. And it's all about harming workers. So, and now he's saying, well, maybe it won't withhold the pay for people who are working without pay for everybody, just those non-deserving workers. Mike Johnson knows the law. Donald Trump knows the law. The workers deserve pay. And that's full stop. That is something we voted on in the first Trump administration. He signed that law. So this isn't up for some sort of legal interpretation. That is the law. But that seems to be very out of vogue with this version of the Republican Party. But the law is clear, and we are going to stand here for workers who are being put in the position of having to show up for their jobs and do their work without pay or be sent home and furloughed, and hope that the Republicans come back to Washington and end their shutdown and get people back to work.
I want to give Nanette Barragan an opportunity to respond to the Representative-elect Aguilar Grijalva situation. Nanette, of course, is the immediate past chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus.
Well, thank you. I want to echo the leader's remarks and say, look, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus is at the largest it's been. You're going to add a new member. She was duly elected. She's ready to work. She's been showing up here. It's a real disservice, and I think a slap in the face to those constituents that voted for her, that she's not being sworn in to be able to do her work as an official member. And of course, we know that she is set to be the last signator on the discharge petition. So I continue to implore the Speaker to do the right thing. I believe he said yesterday he would get it done, and then they walked it back. But we have a Latina from Arizona who's ready and able, and let's not disenfranchise those voters as they have to sit and wait until the Speaker thinks, this political game ends. We should all really call on him to swear her in immediately.
Thank you, Leader. A follow-up on a question that was asked before. We talk about how these subsidies are needed to keep premiums low,